Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Emily, and I'm the Marketing Director for Clinkscales Elder Law Practice. We are very excited to bring you this workshop today, entitled 8 Secrets You Need to Know for the Second Half of Life with attorney Randy Clinkscales. Please feel free to send any questions you have to me that's in the chat box located at the very bottom of your screen. And then at the very end of this presentation, we will address any of those questions you may have. And then also what the follow-up process will be for redeeming your free strategy session and then upcoming events that are happening with us here at Clinkscales. So without any further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Randy to start us off this morning.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Randy Clinkscales. We're just past noon today, so I'm going to correct Emily. We're in the afternoon. We're going to talk to you a little bit about the secrets you need to know for the second half of life. And before I go there, I wanted to tell you that last week I visited with someone, and he was the couple was in their late 50s. And talking about doing things the way that they've always done them. And one of the points that I made with them is that life is so much different today than it was 20 years ago when they did their estate plan. It's so much different today than it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. And so part of the discussion today is talking about, things have changed, and what is it that we need to know because not only because we're older, there's new laws, there's new priorities that we have. So today we're going to talk about important components and considerations for your long-term plan. And what needs to be in there. We're going to talk about ways to preserve and protect your assets. We're going to talk about how to avoid paying too much money to the government. And we're going to talk about ways to stay at home. Now, compare that to maybe when you were in your 30s and you had kids, and your goals were, if something happened to you, who would raise your kids and how would that be paid for? And certainly what we've seen today is with spiraling healthcare costs, people living longer with a chronic illness, all of that changes the way we look at stuff. So this is for you if you're wondering if you need some type of estate plan or whether your current plan is adequate. Again, a couple of weeks ago, visited with a family in their early 60s and did not have an estate plan and had a lot of questions about whether they even needed one. And so we're going to talk about that. If you're concerned about what happens if you become incapacitated, if you're worried about your family and how can you protect them, if they go through a divorce or they're having health issues. If you're concerned about how your property should be divided, if you're wondering how to preserve and protect what you have for your spouse or for your children or for someone else. If you're concerned about long-term care costs, if you're wanting to pass on a business or property to your family, if you're wanting to stay at home and out of the nursing home. If any of these apply to you, then you're really at the right spot. So, when I talk with a family, I like to ask this question or something like it is, if you waved a magic wand, what is it that you would like to have happen? And I know this first one's kind of unusual, but it's one that floats to the top. Stay at home as you age. Want to be sure that you have someone that's going to follow your wishes, not only financially, but also about your health care. You want to stay at home you want to stay in control as long as possible. You want to pass on a legacy to your family. You don't want to lose your property because of government taxes, not worry about losing property and long-term care costs. And probably the big one when you get right down to it is just having peace of mind that everything is arranged. And again, talked with a woman this morning, and I think that was her overall thing, is that she just wants things not to be complicated and wants to know that if something were to happen to her, there's going to be a guide for her family to carry out her wishes. This is just a testimonial that was written by Sherry. She came to us when her husband has Parkinson's, and she stated, my husband has Parkinson's. You helped me keep him at home as long as possible. You showed me how to be a better caregiver. I could not have figured out how to pay for care with Medicare and Medicaid on my own. And she went on to say, I highly recommend Clinkscales Elder Law Practice. So who am I? I am an attorney in Hays and Wichita, with offices in Hays and Wichita, but we have clients throughout the state. I'm what's called an elder care attorney. It's kind of an unusual term, but I focus on people with aging and chronic care issues, but also families that are wanting to get a plan in place to be sure that their resources are protected from long-term care costs so that they can take care of themselves, take care of their spouse, take care of their children, take care of business and the like. I've been an attorney for 40 plus years. The last 16 have really been the best because of my transition into this special type of work. I'd been a general practitioner before, and I'll talk to you about how I got into this here in a moment. This is my family, and it really doesn't have anything to do with anything other than I'm very proud of them. I have 3 sons, a daughter-in-law, and 2 grandsons. Just got to spend 4 days with them in Colorado. This is actually from last year's trip to Colorado. My 2 of my kids live out of state. One lives in Wichita. They've been on this journey with me all their lives. Let's talk about why I'm so passionate. And as I said, I was a general practitioner until my grandmother got sick, and I took over. I took over her care as her grandson because my mom died unexpectedly. And I learned a lot from my grandmother. She wanted to be independent. She wanted to stay out of the nursing home as long as possible. She wanted to protect her assets to maintain the style that she wanted. That is, she wanted to live independently. And I learned also from my grandmother that I, as a caregiver, needed assistance in taking care of my grandmother. And I learned that having a plan is great, but you need a guide as you grow older, because the plan is going to continue to change. When I took over my grandmother's care, she had 3 to 6 months to live. That went on for 10 years. So obviously her plan changed as she actually got better when we started getting good care, and she became much more involved. I also learned, though, along the way that form documents are not the answer. And a lot of when I took over my grandmother's care, she lived in Texas, and she had a bunch of form documents done by just an estate planning attorney. That was kind of a check the box kind of a thing. And so I learned that those were really not what I needed for my grandmother to allow me to protect her and keep her on her journey. This is just a family that Mr. Woods came to see me when his wife got sick. And he stated, when my wife got sick and needed the nursing home, I was told I would have to sell my home and my farm. I thought I would go broke. Randy saved my farm for me and my children. This is actually one of my really early cases. And actually, Mr. Woods has passed on, but I now represent the kids. I have a comprehensive long-term plan is essential for the second half of life because we want to establish, preserve, and protect our wishes. Today, you're going to discover that it's more about form or cookie cutter estate planning documents. Again, conversation that I had this morning with a lady that her kid, she has no kids. Her spouse is gone. She lives alone, but we talked about her powers of attorneys, and we talked about some options that we need to put in there to preserve her wishes. So because we want her goals to be reflected in her plan, you, in this case her, need to decide what needs to be protected. You can protect family members. You don't have to go broke if you need long-term care. And with careful planning, you can avoid unnecessary taxes. But it's important to express your desire and know of different ways to stay at home. And again, the woman I talked to this morning, that was really important to her, is how can she stay independent? There are certain, this first part we want to talk about is there are certain important components that your estate plan should include. There are fundamental documents that need to express your wishes, and those would be your power of attorney for healthcare, financial decisions, a will or a trust, who can we release medical information to, and the like. It's important to make correct beneficiary designations. I cannot stress that enough because your beneficiary designations could really mess up what your overall plan is. And within your plan, you can actually protect your family, protect family members. So as an example, in my case, I have some grandsons that, even though my son's alive, I want to provide something to my grandsons so that if something happens to my son, I know my grandsons are protected. And also special needs planning is important. We have a lot of families that have someone in their family that has special needs and they want to give something to them, but there's ways that we can do it without jeopardizing benefits or losing it all to the government. I've always found this a fascinating story. James Dean, and some of you remember him, you see here in the photograph, but he was an actor back in the 50s and was a bright star flying through the sky when he died unexpectedly, I believe in a car accident. At the time of his death, he was soaring in popularity. He was not married. He had no children. His mother had predeceased him, and he was estranged from his father. When he died in 1955, he had no will and he had no trust. Unfortunately, under what's called intestate law, and that's the law that applies when you don't have any type of planning done, his father was his only heir. And so as a result, the one person that he was estranged from, his father, he ended up inheriting everything, which was about $100,000, but it also included the rights to the name James Dean. And in 2014, the estate was still worth over $4 million. So there's a real lesson there. I want to give you another, this is a family that came in to see us, the Jacksons. And again, I've made up their name, but it's a true story. Mr. Jackson was still working. Mrs. Jackson is retired. They own their home, a family business. Their investments in retirement funds are about $400,000. They have their accounts that pay on death to each other and then to all four of their children. They're relatively healthy. They're in their 60s, late 60s, but they have no estate plan. Interesting family. Their son, Bud, is married with two children. and he works in the business and hopes to take it over. Their son, Mark, is deceased, but they've never updated their pay on death beneficiaries, and he has a special needs child. Their daughter, Debbie, is going through a divorce and has one child. And finally, their daughter, Barbara, has been in and out of a drug rehab program, is divorced, and has two children who live with their father. And I know that sounds like quite a family situation, but it's not as unusual as you would believe. They want the business to stay in the family, and they want to be fair to all the children and to avoid litigation. But again, they want the business to stay in the family. They want something to go to their grandchildren. When they came to me, they said, we don't know where to start. So I explained to them that if we do nothing, then there's no power of attorney with their wishes, and no one has power to act. So if something happened to Mrs. Jackson, Mr. Jackson could not act for her because he does not have a power of attorney, and a court process would be necessary. If they were to die now, there would be a probate. The children would get everything equally, and the business could be lost. So the property could be lost to the divorce that was ongoing, and Barb's drug issues could eat up those funds. The disabled child could be disqualified from benefits, and the investment would end up going to minor children, and a court process would be necessary. So what I did with the Jacksons, what we did together, is that we did powers of attorneys with good agents. We added 14 additional powers to reflect their wishes. We reflected in their healthcare power of attorney what they wanted. So as an example, in my case, I have a whole section in my financial, my healthcare power of attorney that deals with what happens if I get dementia. We set up a revocable trust to manage their property and to avoid probate if something were to happen to them. In there, we expressed that we wanted Bud to get the business, and we said why, and we did that to avoid litigation. We protected Debbie's inheritance from divorce. We did a special needs trust for Mark's child. We protected Barb's inheritance from her drug problems, so something can go to her and her children. So something can go to her children and not to their father. We corrected the beneficiary designations. And when we got done, the kind note, thanks so much for your help. We didn't know what we didn't know. And I always kind of appreciate that attitude that they're going to allow us to explain to them the different things that they really need to address in their planning. So if you're wanting to know what to do, then we're going to schedule with you a strategy session, and together we'll work to determine your goals and concerns. We'll explore what options are available. We're going to talk about the absolutely essential documents that you need and how we can expand them. Then we'll start implementing a strategy right away to avoid roadblocks and changes in circumstances. Again, we're talking about what you need to know for the second half of life. There are ways to preserve and protect your assets for long-term care costs. Again, with the family that came in to see me last week, the initial conversation was a business property. But as we progressed along in our conversation, I asked about, what about if one of you gets sick? And it's just a question that they had never really thought about. But with planning, you can protect what's important to you. You can make decisions on how to pay for care. You don't have to go broke if you need long-term care. And you can protect your spouse or your children. You'll learn that you can use government benefits to pay for care, such as Medicare, VA, and Medicaid. Let's talk about using plan resources to pay for care. And I want to talk about Mr. and Mrs. Johnson. And actually, I met with them a couple of years ago. They were both in their 70s. Mr. Johnson had a stroke and was in the hospital. And Mrs. Johnson called us because he was needing to be discharged. And she didn't know what she needed to know. And so they have their home. They've got an investment in business worth about $500,000. They had long-term care insurance of $200 a day for 3 years. And by the way, long-term care costs now are around $6,500 to $10,000 a month. We have a couple in Wichita that are both in the nursing home, and they're paying $21,000 a month for the two of them. So Mrs. Johnson was concerned about how to pay for Mr. Johnson's care, particularly if she used up the long-term care policy, and she wanted to preserve something for herself and her children. So what did we do? We got one of our care coordinators involved, and we helped transition Mr. Johnson to an appropriate skilled facility so Medicare would pay for his stay at that skilled facility. We developed a plan for Mr. Johnson to come home. We developed a plan so that the long-term care policy would pay for home care and home improvements. And therefore, we shielded some of their resources from long-term care costs by tapping into the long-term care policy. The result is that Mr. Johnson's care at the skilled facility was paid for by Medicare. He got well enough to go home with a lot of assistance, and the assistance was paid for by the long-term care policy. So I want to compliment Mrs. Johnson because getting us involved early on did 4 things. It got Medicare benefits extended, because if he had been discharged to a regular nursing home that was not a skilled facility, Medicare would not have paid for them. In addition, by transitioning him to a skilled facility, Mr. Johnson got the health improvement and the health care that he needed. And that health care was what enabled Mr. Johnson to return home. And the long-term care policy was extended, protecting assets, because we weren't using the full $200 a day to pay for home care. Give you another one. This is a situation where Mr. and Mrs. Schmidt came to us, 72 and 70, recently retired. Mr. Schmidt has IRA of $350,000 and Mrs. Schmidt of $200,000, and they had some investments of $300,000. They had 3 children and 5 grandchildren. They really want to protect each other. That was their real overriding goal. And so if one gets sick, they were concerned that the assets would be depleted and that the spouse would be impoverished. And outside goal, they wanted to leave something to their grandchildren. And again, they were relatively healthy. So in this case, we showed them how to tap into a special type of hybrid life insurance policy with a long-term care rider that had no annual premiums. And so we got that done. I think we used $150,000 of, I think, Mrs. Schmidt's IRA and bought a $250,000 life insurance policy with a long-term care rider of $7,000 a month for up to 5 years. If they don't use the long-term care, then they get the death benefit from the life insurance policy. Anyway, it's a great plan for them. They had some long-term care insurance that was really expensive, and they dropped it. Anyway, they were really happy with the result. But I thought what was funny is that actually it was their children that brought them in to see us because they were afraid their parents had not done anything, and they had not. And then finally, this is one where we actually are dealing with some early chronic illness and how we planned for that, or planned around that actually. So Mr. and Mrs. Lundgren came in to see us. They actually were referred to us by a neurologist. He's been diagnosed with early signs of dementia, and the neurologist called it early cognitive decline. But he's still a very active farmer and has capacity. He's very concerned about what happens if years from now he needs care, and he's concerned for his wife and his children. And when I was talking to Mr. Lundgren, he said, I want to stay in control, but I want to be sure my wife and my land are protected, period. And I think that he just knew that at some point something would have to be done. We set up broad powers of attorney. We put his land into an irrevocable trust. We added his care instructions to his healthcare power of attorney so that when he got to the point where he did not recognize his family, the family would understand what his wishes were. And we met with his agents, who were his kids, and his wife, so they understood that he had made a decision and he wanted them to follow through on it. The result was that though it may be several years before he ever needs health care assistance, his goals are achieved through his plan that's set forth in documents. His land is protected. He's still going to be able to farm his ground. He remains in control. We set up things so that his wife has power to further protect resources should Mr. Lundgren start needing long-term care. And his care goals are protected, taking pressure and guilt off his family when decisions have to be made. Well, let's talk about a situation where there's not a lot of resources and maybe we're running out of money. So in this case, Mr. and Mrs. Reed, he has cancer. He's been discharged to a nursing home, paying $8,000 a month. The assets include Mrs. Reed's $80,000 IRA, their home. They have a joint account of $60,000. So not a lot of stuff there. They were told by the nursing home they would need to spend down all of their resources before Medicaid would help. And Medicaid would put a lien on the home. Mrs. Reed was really worried that Mr. Reed would not get good care if he went on Medicaid. We got involved. One of our care coordinators, in this case, it was a social worker from our office, started working with Mr. and Mrs. Reed. Our benefits team got Mr. Reed on Medicaid. We were able to move resources around so that Mrs. Reed was able to keep all of the assets. We set it up so that no lien was placed on the home. One thing I want to point out here, if Mr. Reed was a wartime veteran, we could have tapped into VA benefits that would have paid up to $2,200 a month tax-free. So just a point there that I want to make is that if you have someone that was a wartime veteran and there's not a lot of resources, the VA will pay up to $2,200 a month. And a lot of times that's a good way to pay for home care. So if you're concerned about how to pay for care or having a plan for that, then we need to schedule a strategy session with you as soon as possible. And we want to explore all the funding resources We want to be sure that we get in place strong powers of attorneys and other estate planning documents. Our goal is to find, get, and pay for good care without going broke. I want to talk about Pat. Pat's one of my favorite clients, only because the transition that occurred while she was in my office. Her husband needed, this is what she said, my husband needed nursing home care. You transitioned me through the process. Your care coordinators made sure my husband was getting good care. I highly recommend you because you're always there for your clients and will guide them through everything that goes on, things we never expected to go through. And I think that was kind of Pat's dilemma, not dilemma, but something that she was struggling with is, why was this happening to she and her husband? They'd been married a long time, and all of a sudden he was sick and she was trying to take care of him and she didn't know where to turn. And she turned to us and we were able to assist she and her husband. Let's transition now to talking about paying for unnecessary, about how to avoid paying unnecessary taxes. And again, what we've seen is there's been quite a few changes. The Secure Act changed some of the IRA rules. The distributions to beneficiaries have greatly changed. As an example, if I leave my IRA to my spouse, she can take it out over the remainder of her lifetime. If I leave my IRA to my children, they have to take it out in 10 years. There are now more ways to make contributions to IRA, and you can delay withdrawals longer under the Secure Act. The CARES Act was passed. That's part of COVID. They suspended required minimum distributions for a year. There are still some benefits to making charitable contributions, but you have to be careful how you do that. You may want to lump them all into 1 year and then skip a year. But again, that's something that we would talk about. We're always concerned with capital gains. So a lot of times I have families that are saying, well, I'm just going to give my business or my land or my stock portfolio to my kids, when in fact that's going to end up causing some tax problems if those children cash that out or sell that property. Or if you sell property, you have to worry about capital gains. And many times when you incur capital gains, that can actually increase the amount of Medicare taxes that you have to pay because of your income. In addition, Medicare can also cause you to incur additional healthcare, we call it a healthcare surcharge of 3.8%. If your income's over $200,000, if you're married over $250,000. And I know that 95% of you out there, maybe 100% of you saying, well, I don't have that kind of income. Well, if you sell a piece of farm ground and you have, you've profited $300,000, well, but now you're into this problem. Generally, we're not going to have to worry about federal estate tax because it's at $11.5 million. So I want to give you an example here of Mr. and Mrs. Augustine. They wanted to transition their farm to their children. They were just going to sell it to the children so children could run it. But the concerns that I had was the Augustines were going to have to pay a lot of capital gains taxes. In addition, if the kids wanted to buy each other out, there would be some taxes involved. I did not want the Augustines to lose control of the property because what would happen if something happened to one of the kids? What would happen if something happened to one of the kids' marriage? or the grandkids or the like. In addition, they were going to end up with Medicaid, their Medicare premiums going up, and they would end up with a surtax of 3.8% on top of all the other taxes they were going to pay. So our solution for the Augustines was that we set up an irrevocable trust, and we set it up in such a way that the Augustines' children will still get a step up in basis. And why that's important is that if after Mr. and Mrs. Augustine are deceased, the kids want to sell it or buy each other out, they can do it tax-free. We went ahead and gave the income to the children because that's what the Augustines wanted. They could have kept it, but they wanted the kids to go ahead and get the income. They let the kids farm it. The Augustines retained the right to change the beneficiaries. The irrevocable trust created no tax consequences. And as a result, then their Medicare premiums did not go up. And again, they would have jumped from $148 to $540.90 a month without this type of planning, just for their Medicare premiums. So finally, I want to talk to you a little bit about how to stay at home. It's one of the most important goals. Just kind of learn it's not your home versus the nursing home. And I want to go back to my grandmother. This is my grandmother, Thelma Wafer. And her quote to me, when my mom died unexpectedly, I tried to get my grandmother to move to Hayes from Fort Worth. And her comment was, quote, honey, I know someday I will have to go to a nursing home. I just don't want to know about it. So my goal for my grandmother was trying to figure out how the heck do I make that happen? This is all she's asking of me. She didn't ask me to save her money. She didn't ask me to do any of this other stuff. She just wanted to stay at home. So what we did as an office is we found resources in the community in Fort Worth. Eventually, my grandmother went on hospice a couple of times. So the last time in Fort Worth, we moved her to Kansas to an assisted living facility. And she was there for 4 years and did great and became much more active and interactive. And then the last 50 days of her life at age 96, she passed away in a nursing home. So the lesson that I had with my grandmother was that with proper guiding, you can stay at home longer. Your transition can be gradual. You can have support for the caregiver is critical, and having resources, and you can stretch your resources to achieve your goals. So what do you need to do if you're wondering about how to establish a plan to stay at home? Is to schedule a strategy session. If you're concerned about developing an aging or chronic care issue, don't wait. The longer you wait, the greater the crisis and the more limited the options. And don't give up. No matter where you are in the process, there are solutions. This was a farmer that came to us, very stoic, and his comments were, I felt very comfortable with everyone I worked with. Clinkscales helped us through some very hard years. So far, you've discovered today that there are important components and considerations for your long-term plan. There are ways to protect and preserve your assets. And if you need long-term care, you don't have to go broke. With planning, you can avoid paying unnecessary taxes to the government. And with proper care and planning, you can delay or avoid the nursing home, allowing you to stay at home longer. I hope you get this one thing. Proper planning with an expert allows you to achieve your long-range goals and protect your wishes, your family, and your property. How do you make that happen? We've talked about the secrets you need to know. Just understand times have changed, you've changed. There are important components and considerations for your long-term plan. You need to incorporate ways to preserve and protect your assets, and you don't want to pay unnecessary taxes to the government, and express and determine different ways you can stay at home. So how does this work? We'll have a 60 to 90-minute strategy session in person, by Zoom or by telephone, with me or one of my other two attorneys, my law partners, Jenny Walters and Adam Dees. At that session, we'll discuss your financial and legal needs. We'll review your estate plan. We'll review your concerns regarding preserving and protecting your wishes. We'll help you establish long-term goals. We'll discuss your tax consequences, and I'll answer all the questions about your unique situation, and they're all unique. At the end of our time together, you'll have a better clarity of your issues and goals. You and us will have established your long-term goals. We'll develop a plan for the second half of your life. You'll need to know what documents and other tools that you need. We'll design together a blueprint on how to achieve the goals, and then we'll give you an exact amount of the investment to achieve those goals. And after our meeting, you'll decide to get started. We will develop a plan with recommendations. We'll work with you to implement that plan. We will prepare all the legal documents that reflect your goals and objectives. We'll schedule another meeting to review, sign, and implement the documents and the tools. We will work together on other tools and steps such as titling of the property, etc. But most importantly, we're going to walk you through this process from beginning to end. Typically, a strategy session like that costs $450. But because you participated today, we're going to book that strategy session for free. Sounds too good to be true. What's the catch? We've scheduled 7 spots for people who participated in this strategy session, in this workshop today. So if you want to take advantage of one of those spots in the next 4 weeks, call this number 877-325-8040, or we'll actually send you a link where you can click and called SurveyMonkey, and then we'll follow up with an email. My personal goal is that you're going to end up knowing more today. My personal guarantee is you're going to end up knowing more than you did today. You're going to have an analysis of what happens if you do nothing, and your time's not going to be wasted. So to book your strategy session, call the number 877-325-8040, or click on the SurveyMonkey that we're going to be sending to you. This screen kind of shows you what the SurveyMonkey is going to look at. If you schedule a strategy session, we're going to give you a book called What You Need to Know for the Second Half of Life, and a written summary of our recommendations. So remember, just call the number or click on the SurveyMonkey in the follow-up email. You'll get the free strategy session, an analysis of your current plan, the free written report to achieve your goals, and the free book. So I'm now going to turn it over to Emily and see if there's any questions or comments.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't look like we have any questions at the moment, but I would encourage everyone to go ahead and type any questions in that chat box right now, just as we go ahead and wrap up really quickly. So we do have one additional session that I wanted to mention really quickly, entitled How to Pay for Long-Term Care on Tuesday, July 27th. Randy mentioned some of the costs of long-term care. So if you're interested in some more information about that, this is a perfect time to get more information. We have sessions offered in the morning at 10 a.m. and then in the afternoon at 3 p.m. So if you're interested in attending this workshop, you can go ahead and call our office at the phone number that's listed on the screen right now, or you can visit our website at elderlawkansas.com/events to register. And I'm going to go ahead and put that in that chat box right here. That way you can go ahead and click on that and get easy access to our website there. Also, as Randy mentioned, you will be receiving that follow-up email from us here at Clinkscales that has the SurveyMonkey link. Please go ahead and click on this link to request the free strategy session, and then we will get that back to you to get scheduled. This follow-up email will also include a recording of today's session. That way you can rewatch it and take notes. You can share it with family members or friends, or you can just rewind to parts of the workshop that you'd like to listen to again. So I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat box now as well, so that we can go ahead and click it and fill it out now to reserve your spot before they fill up quickly. Okay, so I don't see any more questions coming in, so I will go ahead and wrap up here. Thank you, Randy, for sharing that helpful information, and thank you all for taking the time out of your day to join us this afternoon and learn more about how we can help you along your journey. Please go ahead and fill out that survey, and we hope to work with you all soon. Thank you so
Thank you, everyone.
much.
Thank you.